creek and everything.
Okay, my friends, we are recording, and what we have tonight, it's pretty special, I think. Let me arrange my camera. Aren't I handsome tonight? No. But Shawn has made something of a discovery here, and I hope that he's going to explain it tonight, because as he does, I've got a screen share that I can help you with some of the Greek terms now, because I've gone over this pretty well, Shawn, and to see what the different words are for sure. And we did make a mistake, but we'll sort that out as we go on.
Okay. Well, then what I will do, brother, is I kind of had like a little, it's not really a presentation, but it's just kind of a direction I wanted to go and then present this. And if at any time I'm getting any of these definitions wrong, I've studied them out from several different scholars, but you know, whatever that's worth, you know what I mean? So if you have anything to correct or add, please stop me and do, just because this is, you know, this is leading me down other ways or different things I'm thinking about as well that leads off this. So, but anyway, I was thinking about, I don't even remember when it was quite some time ago. I noticed, it was when I was in my ultra dispensationalist days. I noticed two major differences in the New Testament, specifically with the writings of Paul, that jumped out to me. And so one of them, and I'm going to start with this one, even though this isn't the actual topic of what I wanted to present, but this will kind of get you what I'm talking about, is the difference in the translation of the word heaven in our English Bibles. I wish now, knowing what I know now, I kind of wish that maybe the translators would have done something to indicate in the Greek where there was something added, either like a suffix or a prefix or something, where it differentiated it from the general term. And as an example, I used Jackson. How do you pronounce that? Aranii or Aranii or?
I don't know. You mean for the sky? For
the sky, yeah.
Uranai.
Uranai. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. So in instance of those things, when it talks about the kingdom of heaven, or just about any place that you see the word heaven in the New Testament anyway, it's that general word, and it means, technically it means skies, plural, skies. Mm-hmm. You know, but of course the context can dictate if it's talking about possibly something beyond the atmosphere, but that's general, the term of it, heaven. But there are a couple of instances, and they're not many, there's a few, where there was a epi or an ep put in front of it that the way I researched it out, it made it almost like a heaven, but almost like a super heaven, or an above heavens is a term that I often saw translated. It was like quotation above heavens, or the higher heavens, or however you want to look at it like that. But it's found in some very interesting places, and I wanted to look at that. And the first place it's found that I wanted to talk about is in Ephesians. And interestingly enough, a lot of these, Ollie, sorry, I got a mouthy dog here, occur in Paul's writings. But anyway, so let's see here.
What chapter there?
I am in chapter 1 and verse 3. And I'll read out of the King James. Blessed be God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, who had blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places is in italicized, but heavenly places in Messiah. That word heavenly is Aranii, but it's got the F in front of it, like the above heavens in the term.
I'm sorry, what was the verse?
It was verse 3, chapter 1, verse 3 of Ephesians. that word heavenly places, even though places was added, that word heavenly is the word heaven with the accelerator on it.
All right.
Just-
What I think is that wherever you see uranos or uranoi, actually, it's plural.
Mhm.
And I don't think that there is a dichotomy between heavens and sky. I think it should be translated in every case as sky. Else, we would see other terms for that in the scripture. And I think where we land is on earth in the first place. But please go ahead. I see what you're talking about now. It's ep uranoi.
Yes.
Okay, so I studied something completely different. So go on. I'm looking at the interlinear right now.
Okay.
Maybe I'll put it up and share it right there.
Okay. So then if you turn over to Hebrews, just keep that in mind. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 16. It says, and we know that that's the chapter of faith with all the martyrs and stuff. And then verse 16 says, but now, and again, I'm reading out of the King James, but now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly, wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Then if you go to chapter 12, verse 22, this is where that word occurs again. But you are come unto the Mount Zion and unto the city of the living Elohim, the heavenly Jerusalem, and an innumerable company of angels. That word heavenly is that same word with the F in front of it. And this is obvious. The context of this obviously is telling us it's not like our atmospheric skies. This is up there by like the throne room of God type heavens. But again, that same ep is in there. So the way I was looking at it, and it's not anything big and dogmatic, but it was just a difference I noted. And when Paul used it, and in Hebrews, it seems to definitely be talking about not just the local heavens, but the actual heavens where the heavenly beings are and Yahweh is, and that kind of thing. So that's what led me along that thinking initially, was that the heaven thing. So I can stop there. Does anybody have anything they want to say?
I think that that's a pretty good discovery myself. Because if what you're saying is true, and if they put the epi on the beginning of sky, it could mean laying on the sky, or on the sky, or above the sky, because prepositions in this language take on all kinds of different translations. It's probably part of the translator's fault, but epi is a preposition, and it tells you like who, how, when, where, why. And if you've got uranoi, it's almost never singular in Greek. It's almost always plural. So it's never like heaven. It's always heavens, or actually skies. And so you might have something very important here. I'm sure scholars have found this, but look here. In these particular translations in Ephesians, he's got the same word. It's all the same. And he calls this heavenly places. I'd like to see what they do with uranoi, because they usually translate that heaven without the epi on it. And the Bibles that they are giving you, when I do a parallel, they're all standard type Bibles, like English Standard Version, New Revised Standard Version. They're status quo translations. that would work pretty hard to keep the dichotomy, or I should say, lose the dichotomy of epuranois and uranois. Does that follow? Do you follow what I'm saying? They would
Yes, I
want
do.
to say sky. And where your discovery comes in is that if it is the case, what you found, if that's the case, and they're talking about two different places, then we could actually go through, and instead of just getting the general heaven thing, we could see what they're talking about as epuranoi and what is uranoi, and we could make some distinctions between what these evangelists in the Bible are talking about.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Brother Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
This all leads into, to me, the more important thing, which is it goes, for instance, okay, let's start here. We all know about the general resurrection at the last day. It's the one that, like Martha spoke about, when she tells Yeshua, I know, Lord, he'll rise again on the last day. So, and they all knew about that, but there's something strange. And again, I'll start with Paul, because it's in Paul that I first made this. I just noticed this. I didn't make anything. I just noticed it. It's in Philippians.
I can get us over there if you want to tell me what it is.
Philippians 3, we can just read 3:11 through 14.
Okay. Oh, I wish they'd take the NIV out of there completely. Is this it? Finally, my brethren?
Yep.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so now I'll just start in verse 10. Now Paul's speaking of, like he just in the beginning of chapter 3, he's telling them, he's doing this famous, I used to be a Benjamite, a Pharisee, now it's all dung, and now I'm one Messiah, basically. So then he goes on in verse 10, that I might know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable unto his death, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. Now, if you just read that quick, you just kind of read on next to it, and it doesn't really mean too much. But if you actually do it, it's the same case as the heavens. This is the word for resurrection is the general word. Jackson, you can help me out, but the anastemi, I guess, is approximately. He'll correct it later, but
tell me again what verse that is.
Verse 11, chapter
11.
3, verse 11. If by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. That word resurrection is not the general anastemi. It's the one. It says exanastasis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, but this is something. It's not the general term for the last day resurrection that is generally spoken about. This is something that Paul seems to be striving for. And he's saying, if by any means I might, and if you check the Greek in that verse, it pretty much says what it reads. I mean, yeah, it's not something that's guaranteed. It's something he's striving to obtain, which I thought was very interesting because there's that same little ek in front of it. So then that led me to just start researching. Okay, let's find the occurrences of this particular term, and it occurred in some remarkable places. And
you know that the exanastasis, X means out.
Out resurrection.
And here you got right before that, into. I may attain into, not to, the anastasis, which really means standing up, the standing up, out of the standing up is what that looks like to me out of the standing up. Let's take a look at what this Greek word means, if we can, with this old-timey thing here. Came to, unto. Well, then, what is the difference between exanastasis and anastasis? It doesn't have a difference here.
I noted difference like between the two different. So then the question would have to, we would have to ask the question, why add it then? What would be the point of even adding it if it was you and I, we all know that that's not the way it works. You know, if there's it means something. And I think, well, let's just look at a couple more verses that use the same verse or the same word. Well, actually, first of all, I'm reading here out of Rotherham's Emphasized Bible. It's from 1903, I think. But anyway, it's a scholarly Bible. It's a fantastic translation. But I found it, when I first read how he translated this verse, it almost floored me. He says in Philippians 3:10, it says, to get to know him and the power of his resurrection and fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed unto his death. Here's verse 11. If by any means I may advance to the earlier resurrection, which is from among the dead. And he has a footnote, and his footnote says, quotation marks, the out resurrection, end quotation marks. So he saw something here. He's seeing what we're talking about. That's what he saw. And he noticed the difference, and that's why he worded it earlier resurrection. And then he labels it in his footnotes, the out resurrection. I thought that was amazing because this word occurs in some pretty fantastical places. And one of them is, go with me to Luke 20:35.
Did
Right?
you say that Rotherham
Yes.
translates it out, the out resurrection?
He actually translates it in his version, the earlier resurrection, but his footnote says out resurrection.
Just as we decided.
Yeah, which I found was amazing.
Here? Why is my version here doesn't say something like that? Oh, that was just a rhetorical question.
It's English. English, you know what? English is our greatest gift and our biggest curse, it seems, in sometimes when you're trying to figure out what the Greek and Hebrew exactly says in English, you know. But it makes sense because, I mean, they have to just pick the best word for what they think approximates it. Otherwise, we'll have Bibles that are 4 feet thick, you know.
Yeah. That I may attain into the out resurrection. Or what earlier resurrection is?
Earlier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a good acquisition to make, the Rotherham Bible, and you can get that online free of charge to use.
You can, yeah.
And scholars today still say it's the best translation going.
Oh, I've been reading it a lot over the past 6 months here and there, and I've been greatly blessed. But I wanted to go to Luke 20:35, because this right here is another occurrence of this. He says, this to set the stage, he's talking to the Sadducees, and they're talking about, okay, this lady is married to a dude, he dies, she remarries his brother, he dies, and on. Whose wife is she going to be? This is what Yeshua says. Therefore, okay, they ask him, therefore in the resurrection, whose wife of them is she? For 7 had her to wife. Yeshua says, the children of this world age, actually, it should be this age, marry and are given in marriage. But they, okay, now this is really, pay attention real close. But they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that age and the resurrection, that same word, the out resurrection or earlier resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, neither can they die, etc., etc. But that is another occurrence of that word resurrection with the ep in front of it. And I found that fascinating because it fits the exact context that Paul is talking about, or seemingly, I won't say he is, but he seemingly is talking about in Philippians. Now, I just wanted to just say a couple more things and then we can just talk about it. But I know, okay, now I'm thinking logically here and I'm just thinking out loud, but I know for a fact that Yeshua has to be talking about something beyond this, a general resurrection. And I think, anyway, the proof of that is in Luke, because he says, Yeshua is talking to his disciples and he tells them, for he shall be delivered unto the Gentiles and be mocked and spitefully treated and spitted on, and they shall scourge him and put him to death, and the third day he shall rise again. Right? The gospel, we all know it. The next verse says, and they understood none of these things, and this saying was hid from them, neither knew they the things which were spoken. Then if you go over to the end of Luke, he tells them, 45, verse 45 in chapter 24, then he opened their understanding that they might understand the scriptures, and he said to them, thus it was written, and thus it behooved Messiah to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance. So then they understood. So what I'm thinking is that they're having the same problem when Yeshua was talking about these earlier risings from the dead. That's different from their last day general resurrection that we all know. The church, everybody knows that. This seems to be something different because they can't understand it. Yes, it says it was hidden from there then, but if you go earlier when Martha's speaking to Yeshua, she says, listen, I know he's going to rise on the last day. And then Yeshua says, hey, I'm the resurrection of life. And then, squares her away and she understands. But to me, that matches exactly with, and this isn't the only, there's occurrences in other gospels with them saying the same thing about not being up. He just presents, listen, I'm going to go die. And they says they don't understand it, So to me, die and rise from the dead, and they're just like, they don't understand it. But there was one more thing right here, and just another proof text with that is in Mark chapter 9 in verses 9 or 10 and 11. It says, verse 9, and as they came down from the mountain, he charged them that they should tell no man what things they had seen till the Son of Man were risen from the dead. Next verse, and they kept that saying within themselves, questioning one another what the rising from the dead should mean. So they asked him, why did the scribe and Pharisees say Elias might? So they didn't understand what it meant when he said rising from the dead, when he just plainly told them, because I think the only thing they know is last day resurrection. They don't understand Yeshua's the resurrection and the life yet, but which he teaches. So that's pretty much the nutshell of it. But the one thing it hinges on, and I hate to always go back to this, but it's what you're going to do with Paul. Now, if somebody that was a Paul hater that rejected he was a false prophet, they don't care about this. It won't click because whatever Paul says is junk. I'm not of that mindset, and so this spoke to me. It was something that I really thought I've been waiting to share this with people that can actually listen and understand and not ready to throw rocks at me. So I'm really anxious I'm just going to shut up now and listen and hear what you guys have to say. Thank you for listening, guys.
He really did go away. Isn't that something that this understanding was kept from them? Why would this understanding be kept from them?
I have an idea about that, actually. I think it was kept from them because he was there as the Mashiach bringing the kingdom. And I think that his new covenant in his blood wasn't given yet. So I think that once that was done and he shed his blood and paid the penalty for the sins of the world, I think that at that moment is when he opened or not that moment, but after that time is when he opened their understanding so they can understand from the scriptures, like it says, what his death really was. So they could go and present it to the world, I think. That's my thoughts anyway.
Well, in John chapter 9, Yahshua was talking about I guess it's the afterlife. And he says, of course, that once a person comes into that knowledge, or actually he says, the word of Elohim and the testimony of Yahshua, or words to that effect, then they don't die anymore. That is their resurrection, that they're already resurrected. So that sounds to me like the ex uranos. It sounds to me like certainly something different than the general resurrection, which would be called anastasis. And I'll get into that a little more here in a minute. That's an excellent teaching. Did you happen to look and see where in the New Testament that word was showing up? Was it just in Paul?
It was in Paul, and then the place I shared from Luke where Yeshua said,
Luke.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not in the Gospels.
Other than Luke, yeah.
And I doubt that it would be in the Septuagint, because the Septuagint doesn't really deal with that much, but I would imagine that the Apocrypha in between the Testaments would. I remember places spoken of as an afterlife or as a resurrection while you're still alive. And that's the way I believe it. But I never had a way to kind of, as you said, proof it. Now we need to make some proof on this and go through and see exactly what Paul's talking about here, and why in the world the Bible translators, popular translations, would not translate this correctly, whereas Rotherham has. So, you put a preposition in front of a Greek word, and it can do one of mainly two things. One, it can tell you the who, what, when, where, why of the word that it's hooked up to. And this preposition, it was X or ep. It was X, out of. You know what that preposition means, because it means the same thing in English, out of. So we have, as Rotherham says, we've got an early resurrection. And I would consider that to be the same thing Yeshua is talking about in John chapter 5. And then without the X, we have a general resurrection that is supposed to happen on the day of judgment. However, how can we define the day of judgment? When that is? His days are different. He says, my days are as 1,000 years. Whatever that means. The point I'm making is that it could be that these people are dying, but being resurrected and judged in the interim time. If a day is 1,000 years, judgment day to me is 1,000 years. It's during the millennium period. So I've been thinking, what is it in Elohim's time? It could be the entire amount of nearly 2,000 years since the first century. It could have started right with Yeshua's resurrection. And of course, Yeshua was able to take complete control of his own first resurrection, because he said, no one's come down, but no one's gone up except the one that's come down from the skies, meaning him. And with his extra and spare powers, especially after his bodily resurrection, these are the tools that he has promised to us as post bazaar, post corporeal that we can assume even before our body dies. And I didn't do that very well because I'm trying to think about it at the same time. But isn't it possible that the general resurrection just kept going on ever since the time of Yahshua's resurrection? Look, it even says in Matthew 28 that the graves were open. And you can think of that as somebody going and digging of the grave down to a bunch of bones. But that's not what the phrase means. Go ahead, Shawn, before I get myself in too deep here.
No. Yeah, I also, oh, crud, I lost my train of thought. It'll come to me. Go ahead, brother.
I think that's just happening to the both of us, actually. This is kind of a topic that we certainly have all thought about it time and time again, but there is so much cognitive dissonance from what we've been brought up to believe. And as for me, I was brought up to believe that when somebody dies, they just go to hell. And if somebody is born again, then they're saved and bound for heaven when they die. And that doesn't even resemble what the New Testament says about resurrection. Doesn't even resemble it. Because if you're down in hell and you believe that way, you're going to say, oh, goody, goody, one of these days I'm going to be resurrected out of hell and brought back. But what he doesn't understand is he's going to be brought back just to be thrown in hell again. That makes no sense whatsoever, to me anyway. How about you? Tell me what you think.
I agree with you. Absolutely. There's the problem with it, I think, is that the more and more we actually learn scripture properly in its proper context and stuff, I think the more we just got to kind of almost treat Christianity like just simply a ministry opportunity. I mean, there's just so much. There is some good there. I'm not slamming all Christianity, but man, they have so much wrong, and some of it is very foundational things. And it reminds me of Hebrews 6 when the writer's saying, listen, man, when you were a child, when I was a baby, I drank milk, but you got to move on. And it just seems that Christianity has just never really moved on. Oh, I know what I was going to say, Jackson. I was going to talk about, you were talking about how you think maybe the general resurrection has been ongoing. And I agree with that. And this is why I agree with that. I believe that Yeshua fulfilled the feast days, unleavened bread, Passover, and then first fruits. He rose on first fruits. And then the saints rose after he did the same. So, and I believe that the feasts are not just one and done events. They're cyclic, just like time and history and events, cycle and cycle. So I think if there's resurrections throughout history, my guess would be they would probably be on first fruits, during the time of the first fruit season, taking out the first fruits, the overcomers, if you will, from each generation, or they don't even have to be martyrs, but those that are doing what Paul is speaking of and Yeshua is speaking of, those that were found worthy to obtain that earlier resurrection, the one out from among the dead ones, to stand up, the standing up out of the dead, basically. But they don't, and the thing is that they don't say it as a quote unquote once saved, you're good. It's not the general I'm saved now. It is something that they have to strive for. Paul talks about running the race, and he's trying to win at the end and all this, and Yeshua, we already, this is, I'm not speaking, you guys all know this perfectly well. So to me, that first fruits resurrection throughout the ages, it would not surprise me. I can't prove it. I mean, maybe there is some kind of evidence scripturally. I don't know it, but it would make sense cyclically if overcomers from generations are granted that out resurrection, or earlier, however you want to word it, as a reward for faithful service. I mean, maybe Enoch's, even though Enoch didn't die that we know of before he was taken. However, maybe it's a type like that. Maybe it's just, hey, he was so righteous, God just took him. Maybe it's something along those lines, or like Ezekiel, the kind of a thing like that. Maybe all those things kind of, even the Apostle John, when he receives his vision in chapter 4, verse 1, we've all heard the preachers from the pulpits, I can picture Pastor Ball, 4:1, come on up here there, that's the rapture. Well, if you think, I went through a period of time where I laughed at it, but now I thought, you fool, don't laugh at that, because you never know. What if it is? What if John's taking out into the spiritual heavenly places, for lack of a better term, to receive this vision? Maybe it did picture some kind of a catching away. I mean, who knows? And maybe it has nothing to do with whether it's pre-trib, post-trib, whether the trib happens again. Maybe it has nothing at all to do with that at all. Maybe it's the first fruits resurrection, where Yahweh is pulling out the first fruits, really these days, of the Gentiles called out for his name, just like Peter says, filling up the tabernacle of David. Maybe that's what he's doing. And maybe it is like Paul says, when the fullness of the Gentiles has come, then that'll be it. Then he'll come. I mean, maybe that just could be the way it goes. But so, okay, so I'll shut up now, but that's what I was thinking, Jackson, about the cyclic resurrections in accordance with the feast fulfillments.
Okay, great, excellent teaching. I'll carry on with that here in just a second. I want to know more about Abram's bosom that Professor Smith was talking about. And does that come in this scheme or not? Where does that come in? Because obviously, the way I understand it is that Yahshua is telling these Hellenists a Greek fable that everybody at that time knew and were forced to believe. Why? Because Yahshua uses a model right out of Greek literature, and he also uses the word Hades, which is not only the name of a Greek place, but also the name of the Greek god over that place. So I'm very serious about this now, Professor Smith, if you're still there. I'd like to know more about that, if there is any more to know. And we'll give you 13 seconds to tell us.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that analysis there, Jackson, you talked about, because that would imply that Yeshua, not only would that lower him out of the divinity realm and out of the perfection realm to where everything that comes out of his mouth is the truth. It would lower him to sort of nothing more than a philosopher. But the notion that this was just a Greek mythology. Also, you got problems with the text itself where it says there was a man named Lazarus. And if it was going to be a parable, then it usually is prefaced by saying, and he began to speak in parables. So in this case, he doesn't say that in any of the Gospels.
This isn't a parable.
So I have no reason to believe that it's not anything other than authentic. So
But-
I accept that as that this is a picture of the way things are in the underworld, at least until Yeshua was resurrected and the first fruits were resurrected with him. And I think that's what Paul's talking about in the Gospels.
Well, usually yes, usually that is true. This is an allegory, though, and it's also biblical. It's like both ways, because who's Lazarus? Well, that's that Eleazar that was the slave of Abram. And who are the 5 brothers? According to smart exegetics, the brothers are the sons of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The sons of Isaac? I'm a little confused. Judah, Naphtali. No, I got this wrong. They are brothers. The 5 brothers are the sons of who? Judah is one of those brothers. Yeah, right, the rich man's brother. Now, who are those 5 the son of? Jacob? I've lost it in my mind. Who is Judah's father? Oh, I don't feel so bad now. Everybody knows that. Doesn't know that.
Judah from the 12 patriarchs. Judah.
Yeah.
Jacob.
Okay, Jacob. 5 of his sons. That's right, Jacob. It's coming to me now. Jacob by Leah. Now, this isn't my understanding. This is simply what I know that the critical Bible scholars tell us about it, that it is a Jewish story that comes from the life of Abraham. And you know, Lazar or Lazarus, the actual name there is Lazar. People are still named Lazar or Lazar or even Lazar. That is a shortened form of Eleazar, the man of Damascus, who is down there in the pit, while all the sons are living in great luxury. And it would seem that that would also be a parable, maybe adopted from Greek. I kind of think so, but that would give those people who are in the line of those brothers reason to fear. Because they'll end up the same way unless they do teshuvah. Does that sound like a possibility? That's why I wanted to hear a little more about Abram's bosom. And I am very serious here, Gregory, as to finding out what exactly that means. So if you're in Abraham's bosom, can you kind of give me, or somebody give me, an idea of what that is going to look like, or what that looks like?
Yeah, well, the way I understand it, Jack, is it's in a compartment in the center of the earth, and there's a chasm that splits the 2 off. One side is considered a holding compartment where there's no torment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a place of holding until the resurrection. The other side, across the chasm that can't be crossed over one way or the other, is a place of torment. And so that you could say is like a form of hell, because these are people like the rich man that, lived for himself all his days, didn't even want to barely give the scraps Lazarus, the story. And, and then, and he's begging Lazarus to, or Abraham to send Lazarus back and tell his brothers so that they don't have to have the same fate that the rich man does. He's in torment, in fire and torment. So it's a compartment that is that in the Abraham's bosom, or this paradise compartment. Actually, it disappeared. At the resurrection, when it says that there were many saints that came out and started walking around. My understanding is that then closed off, and there's a cryptic saying. It says in the Bible that hell hath enlarged itself. So it's a reference to that period where hell, where the torment part literally took up the space that previously was Abraham's bosom, because all the souls, all the righteous saints were resurrected. And these were the first fruits of them which arose that Paul references, Christ and first fruits with him. So it all fits into the feast as well. So then what's in there now, that compartment, when it says hell hath enlarged itself? So anyone who dies without Messiah now goes there into torment, okay, until the resurrection, until the great white throne judgment. But someone who dies in Messiah, their body goes into the ground and is sleeping, their physical form, which degrades, but their spirit goes to be with the Lord, with Yeshua. And then at his resurrection, when he comes in the cloud, as it says in Thessalonians, then what happens is the bodies of the righteous come out of the ground and they meet the spirit, and they become unified in such that they have a resurrected body, in the same way that Messiah had a physical substance to him when he arose, because he had that physical body. He could be touched, he could eat clearly after he was resurrected. But he also had the abilities that reputedly Adam had, the ability to transport, to go through matter, to he had what's called the power of the air title, and he could move rapidly from place to place. The physical constraints that normally bind us were not present in him, in Yeshua. And so this is the way it will be at the coming of the Master, when those who are in Messiah it says the dead shall rise in Christ first to meet the Master in the air, and then we which remain will be caught up into the air and be changed in the twinkling of an eye. Okay, and we with the dead rising first will be, their bodies will be reconstituted to meet their spirit in the air, and they will have a full glorified body. That's my understanding of the resurrection event. And so and then that the picture is completed in Zechariah chapter 14, where we have Christ and all of the saints then coming down and touching down. It says Christ touches down on the Mount of Olives, and then it talks about how the Mount of Olives will cleave in two, and there'll be a great valley, and water will come forth out of Mount Zion, and will flow into the to the sea, and it will purify the water. And there's a lot of that is in Zechariah. Some of the 1,000-year reign of Messiah scriptures speak of, the animal kingdom will be restored. There'll be no more harsh winter or summers. That all the seasons will be temperate. It's going to be temperate for 1,000 years. That it could be in some way there's going to perhaps the canopy will be restored, so that those who make it into that 1,000-year reign, who are physical, who are not resurrected, but these are physical people that make it into the rule and reign of Christ, will then be able to live much longer. They may live to be as long as 1,000 years. It'll be like pre-flood conditions of sort, except probably better, since Christ is going to be ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. So That's essentially in a nutshell my thought on all that.
Very good. I want to add one thing to it. There is a beautiful country-like atmosphere in one place just south of Jerusalem today. If you look at pictures of it, you'll really be surprised because it's a biblical place and it's called Gehenna. Now, in the time of Yahshua, as you know, Gehenna is the word behind hell in the New Testament. Gehenna was thought to be the opening place to this, what Second Enoch calls a heaven, which is in the earth, a space. And I think I discussed one time not long ago that, just like you said, in this one space, and I'm thinking it's a second or third heaven, I can't remember exactly, that the righteous are waiting on one side with Jesus there, I read someplace, and the unworthy are on the other side. And that place is separated by a tributary of the lake of fire going through, just as per Luke, I think it's 16 that you were just talking about. But you would never know that by looking at Gehenna today. They believe that there was a tunnel that went from the trash heap, the Valley of Hinnom, from Gehenna, and that tunneled down to that place in the middle of the ground. But you said it was blocked off. It is blocked off now, actually, because now it's the beautiful country setting there. And anybody can go down there and get a picnic table or camp or whatever they want to do. It's a beautiful, lush area. Could be because of all the rotten corpses that were on top of it at one time. This is the place where Isaiah, in Isaiah 66, he talks about this place of torment where you will witness the dead bodies and the worms crawling through them and so forth. But it has indeed been shut off. Now, I don't know when that happened, but it's made into a kind of earthly paradise. And so I'm going to try to find out when that happened. And I think maybe that might be the closing up that you mentioned before. First thing that came to my mind. Okay, we have Shawn again, and then I'll finish it up.
Okay. I just wanted to add a couple things. I think, Brother Gregory, I agree with just about everything you said. The only difference being, I think that the kingdom is going to be given. I think the boundaries of the kingdom will be the land of promise that God gave to Abraham and told him to step it out. I think the city of Jerusalem, I think it's all pictured in a tabernacle. I think the outer courts, the inner courts, the holy place and the holy of holies. I think there's places within the Jerusalem that will be for the quote unquote overcomers, or those that maybe like we were talking about tonight. And I think there'll be the redeemed generally will be living within the land of the kingdom. And I think that will be ministered to the rest of the world, because we know that some of those will not receive rain if they're not obedient. They don't keep the Feast of Tabernacles, and there'll be curses given to some. And we know that if Revelation chapter 20 is to be taken in a literal sense at some point that hasn't happened yet, then we know that that makes sense then. After the 1,000 years and Satan's released, and then there's a vast multitude of people from the rest of the world that were, for whatever reason, would not receive and were unrepentant and whatnot. And then the final destruction, and then the great white throne. So that's kind of the way I was looking at it. I think that all prophecy is only speaking of the land that God, the land of promise, because I think there's so many times in our Bibles, especially in the New Testament, is where it really does the most damage, I think. But so many times it's translated world or earth, and it should not be translated that way. It should be translated land or even portion of land, because that's most often what it means. At least from what I've been able to find out, because when you read it that way, then it, you know, the tribes of the land instead of the nations of the earth. It's the tribes of the land, because we're talking about, you know, is the Israel of Yahweh, you know, the people that are called out for his name, you know. So anyway, those are my last, those, I was just thinking of that as you guys were talking. It just kind of made me think of that. And I think the tabernacle pictures it perfectly, you know, as far as the map of the kingdom.
Very good. Good, good. Look, we aren't in a fight, or we're not in a contest to try to see who wins and who doesn't. I want to top this off then with something else we talked about, Shawn, that I did look into, and I want to share my screen. Oh boy, there we go. This is a part of 1 Corinthians 15. As you know, that's the resurrection chapter. And I believe that we talked about this the other day, but if not, I thought we were talking about this. Now, if Messiah is preached as raised, we want to look at this word. Let me spell it in English for you, and you can learn a couple of Greek letters. That's an E. First one is an E. Epsilon. The second one is a G. Gamma in the lowercase. The third letter is an eta that has the sound of A or Ah. Just as in the name of Yahshua, that's the letter that gives you the Ah. We have another G, E. This thing, that's an R. If it looks like a P in Greek, then it's an R. And the last three are easy, T, A, I. Egeratai. Now think of egg, arrow, tie. Egeratai. If Christos is preached as raised, egeratai, from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection? Anastasis. That's an A. That thing that looks like a V, that's an N. Another A. This that looks like an O with a cap on top, that's an S. T, A, S, I, S. Of course, we use this word in English as well. A lot of people have this name, anastasis, of the dead. These two words are evidently referring both to the resurrection of the dead. And this one, egeratai, egero means lifted up. This is not a preposition to start. This is the root, eger. And it means just that, raised. He be raised from the dead. How can some of you say that there is no resurrection? Anastasis. What does that mean? Ana is a preposition. and it means again or up. It has three meanings. They're the same meanings of born again. It can mean born from above, born again, and there's one more that doesn't come to me right now. So that really means stand up. And it is a noun, so it is a standing up of the dead. I haven't seen anything in the resurrection chapter that would confirm that there is another a better word for the resurrection of the dead, because this is raising up or lifting up. If I be lifted up, I will draw all people unto me. And this one doesn't mean resurrection either. It means standing up. Or a stand-up one, a standing man or woman. But he uses these throughout. There doesn't seem to be an actual word for resurrection, but they have taken this word and made it to mean resurrection. But what is the difference between these two? Now, did we not talk about this the other night? Do you remember this? Okay.
I don't remember it, but I missed a couple, so I might not have been
No,
there.
I think you and I talked on the phone about it because I went right here, but that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Yes. Yeah, you're right. We did.
Okay. But
Yeah,
if there's no resurrection, anastasis of the dead, then Messiah has not been raised. Ageratai. If Messiah has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain. I just want to put that in there. K-E-N Ada. Kene. Kene. Something in vain. That word pops up all over the place. And does it mean nothing? Or does it mean vain? I think it means something more like nothing. And your faith is in vain. See if there's a little more of that. And there's the first fruits. For as by a man came death, by a man has come also the anastasis of the dead. Well, we talked about this, and I made a mistake of thinking that there was an epi put on the front of anastasis, but I didn't find that. What I did find was the difference between raised and a resurrection, besides one being a verb and the other being a noun, which is another situation where we have two words that mean two different things that neither one of them mean resurrection straightwise. And it might be a good thing for somebody who has time and somebody who is somewhat knowing of the original language of this, if it was Greek, to go through here and make a distinction on those two. Because it seems to me when I translate Greek, the status quo translator has already bought into its system. And if you use Strong's Concordance, you bought into the same system. That is the church system of how these words are supposed to be defined rather than what they really say.